All right, folks, so last time we met, we talked about the Second Great Awakening and the changes in religion. So today what we're going to be talking about are Antebellum Reforms. So again, the Antebellum Reforms, or those reforms before the Civil War. And specifically, the first point I want to make is the impact of the Second Great Awakening on those Antebellum Reforms. The impact of the Second Great Awakening on those Antebellum Reforms. Because one, these Antebellum Reforms didn't just happen. A few things happened during the Second Great Awakening to promote these reforms. Number one is that idea of personal salvation. Why might personal salvation during the Second Great Awakening result in Antebellum Reforms? This idea of personal salvation. Why might that promote more reforms in society than without the Second Great Awakening? Omar.
Since people now have like a choice to heaven or hell, I'm guessing religious fanatics would want everybody to go to heaven.
So maybe it's because you have a lot more people wanting to get everyone to go to heaven, but what does that have to do with reforms? I'm talking about mental reforms, health reforms, slavery reforms, domestic reforms. Why are all these reforms being promoted in society? Yes, Rudy.
Because now you're able to change how you are. If you're a bad person, you can change it, and nothing's decided.
Okay, so maybe this idea that you can change yourself. If you're an alcoholic, could you become better now? Or did you have the opportunity to become better? And not only just change yourself, who else might you want to change? Society. You want to change society. And also, with regard to personal salvation, one of the ways to be saved was that you had to do what? You had to do good works. So if you want to go to heaven, are you going to have to help society? Are you going to have to go out and make society better? Fight things like slavery, fight things like alcoholism. And so the Second Great Awakening would help promote that. The other idea was this democratization of religion. With regard to the democratization of religion, folks, again, we talked about this a little bit earlier today, but the idea of the democratization of religion, how is that going to help promote social reforms? How did the democratization of religion help the common man? Okay, they could choose their own religions. What else? How else did the common man benefit from the democratization of religion? They feel more what? Empowered. And so if they feel more empowered, what might they feel empowered to do? Change what? Yeah, if they feel more empowered, wow, I can help myself, I can save myself. Well, if they're more empowered, they might feel empowered to change society. And lastly, you also have the feminization of religion. And how might the feminization of religion result in social reforms? The idea of, women, being the mothers to society. Just like they want to take care of their children, do they also want to take care of society? Where are their kids going to live? In society. So if society's full of corruption and greed and alcoholism, are the mothers going to want to have to fix that? Yes, because they don't want their kids or their families to live in that kind of society. So this feminization of religion in which women also felt empowered, now they're going to take that empowerment and they're going to say, hey, if we can fix our families and if we can fix our churches, why not fix our societies? So again, the Second Great Awakening directly impacted antebellum reforms. Make sense so far? That sense that these people feel now that they can do something, they have a reason to do something, so they will go do something. So one of the things that you see happening at this time, first off, is by the reformer Dorothea Dix. So Dorothea Dix is the first reformer that we're going to be talking about today. And Dorothea Dix promoted prison and mental health reform. She promoted prison and mental health reform. So before, folks, when you went to jail, they wouldn't put you in like a building with a cell and a door. You know, they would actually, likely times, lock you up in like these caves or dungeons where they would just put like a gate on the front, and that was jail. It wasn't a nice room with a bed. It was just a hole in a mountain and be like, okay, you're going to be living here from now on. You're in jail. There's going to be rats and bugs and whatever else. You're probably going to die from pneumonia because of the dampness. And that's jail. The other problem was that back then when people went to jail, all that happened to them was that they would get beaten, and then when they served their time, they'd release them. And that was it. That's all jail was. And what's the problem if you go to jail for a crime and then they hold you for 2 years and they just release you? What's probably going to happen? You're going to do it again, because did they teach you to be a better person? Did they try to make you better? No, jail was just a place to punish. And that's what jail was like before. In fact, folks, jail was also pretty terrible because young offenders, young criminals, were put in the same jail cells as older men. What likely happened in those situations? If they were young children who stole, or they let's say they committed murder, whatever the case may be, those young children were put in the same jail cells as older men. So what likely happened in those scenarios? They were likely raped, beaten. They were put in the same jail. If you were, let's say, you stole a loaf of bread, you might be put in the same jail cell as a murderer. What's likely to happen to that guy? He might get murdered or beaten or raped or whatever else. And so again, jail was not ideal. So Dorothea Dix decided, as compelled by the Second Great Awakening and that sense of empowerment that it gave her, decided we should fix prisons. And what she decided to do was to shift prison from punishment to rehabilitation. They want to shift prison from punishment to rehabilitation. What does that mean, folks? To better them. Rehab. We're going to try to better them. If they went to jail for stealing because they couldn't find a job, what might we do? Maybe teach them skills to be able to get a job. If they couldn't read before, what might we do? Teach them to read. If they went to jail because of drugs, we might try to get them off drugs. The whole point of prison today is not punishment. It's rehabilitation. To try to get people to repent, to try to get people to feel shame for what they did, and in hopes of giving them a better life. Yeah, we have to punish them too, but the whole point is to hold them and rehabilitate them, so when they go back into society, what won't they do? They won't corrupt or reoffend. That's the whole point. They separated prisoners. This was really good for who? Children especially. They separated prisoners. They ended debtor's prison. Why is that good? You can't go to jail for being in debt. And who does this benefit the most? The common man. So they eliminated debtor's prison. And they improved conditions. Now, some people might have considered back then, why are we spending so much money on criminals? I mean, they're horrible people, right? But the reality that we have to understand is that how many rich people are going to prison here? Few to none. And how many poor people are going to prison? Almost every single one. So, might it not be a problem of crime, and maybe more a problem of the system? There's a systemic problem in society that has to be fixed. And so it's only poor people going to prison. maybe there's a problem with the system that's sending only poor people to the prison. Maybe it's a lack of jobs. Maybe it's a lack of conditions. Maybe it's a lack of skills or literacy. But Dorothea Dix said, we have to fix that. We can't just send poor people to prison all the time. That's not fair. Make sense so far? So prison reform. The other was mental health reform. And this was an important one for her as well. The problem is, if you were mentally ill, most people that were considered mentally ill were treated as criminals. So if you were crazy and you, let's say, accidentally, murdered someone, and you were literally crazy, should you be treated like a normal criminal? No, because if you have a mental illness, you should be treated as if you're what? You're sick or have a disease. And so what she wanted to do with the mentally ill was to begin to treat them like they were sick. They want to treat them as if they had a sickness and not just a crime. Because what they used to do is that if you were mentally ill, they would just, and you were crazy, they might just chain you up to a bed and just leave you there because you couldn't respond to basic commands, or they might just lock you in a closet and leave you there and chain you up in the closet, and that's what you knew for the rest of your life. And they would feed you maybe through a small hole, but most of these people that were crazy would just live there. They'd go even crazier. They'd defecate over themselves. They'd eat their own feces. I mean, it was not an ideal situation, but because these people were sick and not being treated as if they were sick, were they just getting worse? And so what she said is, we can't treat the mentally ill like they're criminals. We have to treat them like they're sick, because that's exactly what they are. They have a mental illness. So instead of sending the mentally ill to prisons, where did we start sending them? To asylums, or mental health asylums. A mental health asylum where they would be given what? Treatment, therapy, medical staff. And are we going to be giving these people the help that they need? Yes. And so now you have a huge shift. And so again, folks, who's really going to benefit here? The common man. Prison reform, definitely, and in mental health, likely the common man as well. Because if you're rich and you have a family member that's mentally ill, what could you probably afford? Treatment, a doctor, whatever else. But if you're poor and your family member is mentally ill, are you going to be able to help them? Probably not. And so now the system or the government says, we should help here. And so Dorothea Dix helped provide that assistance. Good for everyone so far? Dorothea Dix, mental health and prison reform, drastically changing society. You guys see what I mean now by social reforms? Okay, the next type. The next person. Temperance. Let's talk about the temperance movement. So the whole idea of temperance, folks, the whole idea of temperance was to reduce or eliminate the consumption of alcohol. So again, the whole temperance movement, the whole purpose was to reduce or eliminate the consumption of alcohol. That's the whole purpose of temperance, to reduce or eliminate the consumption of alcohol. And this movement was mostly led by who? Mostly led by women. It was a movement mostly led by women. In fact, you're going to notice that most of these antebellum reforms are going to be led by who? By women, because are women going to take more of a role in society now? And so women are going to play much more of a role. And so one of the key things that women tried to do that was said that lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. So if you want some of this, you're not going to be drinking no alcohol. Okay, so that's kind of the idea. So women, did it work? Of course it worked for some. So in any case, folks, they wanted to end alcohol consumption, and here's why. Let's talk about the problems caused by alcohol. So the problems caused by alcohol in society at the time, and this might still sound familiar today, but the problems caused by alcohol included the following. Number 1, criminal behavior. So again, the problems caused by alcohol included criminal behavior. 2, unemployment caused by absenteeism. What does that mean? You're not showing up to work because you're too drunk the next morning or that day. And so unemployment or absenteeism, or unemployment caused by absenteeism, that's also a problem. They believe that alcoholism caused insanity. But to be fair, though, you were probably already crazy before you started drinking, but it doesn't make it worse. Yeah, so if you were a little bit crazy, you were a lot more crazy with alcohol. Poverty. Why might alcoholism cause poverty? You're spending money on alcohol, you're not working, you're driving your family into the gutter. It might cause domestic abuse. Why? Yeah, family members get angry at each other, fathers or mothers start beating each other or their kids. Pretty problematic there. It oftentimes led to divorce. Why might that be a problem? Yeah, it makes it very bad for the children, bad for religion. You might result in orphans as well. Why is that a problem? Yeah, the children have no one to take care of them. Maybe their parents died or separated or left them alone. All problems. And then, of course, it led to bros. I'm just kidding. Bros. Alcohol led to the creation of bros, which no one likes. Anyway, so these are serious problems in society, folks. And were these problems that needed to be fixed? And even today, can you see that alcoholism still causes these problems today? Yeah, there's still a very close relation today to the problems of society here versus way back when. So in any case, folks, there were 2 goals to deal with alcohol. First was temperance. So the 2 solutions were 1, temperance. The 2 goals were first temperance. Temperance. And the idea behind temperance was that you would reduce the amount of alcohol. You would temper or reduce the amount of alcohol, and we would eliminate alcohol, but what? Over time. We were going to reduce alcohol over time. That was called temperance. We got to reduce alcohol over time. We got to get rid of it, whatever else. But the other group said no. By the way, that group that wanted temperance was known as the American Temperance Society. They wanted to reduce alcohol over time because was it kind of crazy to assume that we'd get rid of it all in one day? All right, guys, alcohol, no more starting today. That wasn't going to happen. And so they said maybe over time we can encourage the reduction of alcohol. But another group said no. They wanted complete abstinence from alcohol. And they were called the what? The teetotalists. And the teetotalists said, we want a complete abstinence from alcohol. Abstinence means to abstain from. What does that mean, to abstain? To refuse, to stay away, to not use. I abstain from alcohol. Abstinence. Complete abstinence from alcohol. So that was the whole idea behind teetotalists. They wanted complete abstinence. One of those complete abstinence teetotalists was a guy named Neil S. Dow. He was a teetotalist who in 1851 he passed something called the Maine Law. Guess which state he passed it in? Maine. Clever. You guys are good. Anyway, he passed the Maine Law, which banned the sale of alcohol in Maine. It banned the sale of alcohol in Maine, making Maine what kind of state where if they ban alcohol, what do you call that kind of state when alcohol is banned? A dry state. Very good. So in the Maine law in 1851, they banned the sale of alcohol completely, making Maine the first dry state. Now, were they successful? The answer is kind of. They were mildly successful. Which is still better than not successful, right? Were they able to convince some to stop drinking? Folks, were they able to convince some? Sure. 4 million people, that's a lot, agreed to abstain from alcohol. That's impressive. But is all of society going to agree? No, absolutely not. But crime did decrease, which is a plus. Crime did decrease, as did alcohol consumption. Okay, we'll continue this conversation about social reforms tomorrow.